Maybe the real Philosopher's Stone is the friends we made along the way. I watched As Above, So Below. My tour guide in the catacombs when I was there brought this movie up, and he was like, it's not accurate. I am once again drinking my tea. Gotta review the rules for the drinking game. An ancient text rhymes in English. Evil children. An inverted cross used to represent Satan or something evil. A college professor is an expert in this exact thing. The audience is given a verbal, in-depth explanation of whatever's happening. Fake out jump scares. Spooky thing shown only for the audience and the characters don't see it at all. Explicit sexual content. Sequel bait. Blatant references to horror classics. Misleading trailers. Those are definitely not teenagers. That is not how teenagers act. Literally, nobody would ever do that. This detail went nowhere and is never mentioned again. By the way, there's kind of a fair amount of suicide-related content, so if you are sensitive to that sort of thing, I would suggest not watching this movie. Let's start talking about As Above, So Below. The description for this movie on Netflix is a beautiful tomb raider and her crew hunt for treasure in the catacombs of Paris and find themselves in a hellish underworld. She's a Lara Croft type.
My name is Scarlett Marlowe.
She's established early on as someone who doesn't really care about her life or the lives of the people around her. She has no problem breaking into places. She will literally do whatever it takes to accomplish what she is after. First introduction we get of her is on a bus in Iran. She's like hunting for this weird Rosetta Stone thing. I'm already tired. She has like several doctorates. She's a college professor. She speaks 6 languages, 2 of which are dead. She is everything I want to be. Her dad was an archaeologist. He ended up killing himself, searching for the Philosopher's Stone, George. I assume her ex-boyfriend is an American guy who breaks into old places and repairs things. His intro scene is he broke into the bell tower of a church and repaired the bells because they'd been broken for like 200 years or something. I don't know. So they're really the perfect couple, but George wants nothing to do with Laura.
Scarlett.
He ends up giving in to doing her a favor or something because she's beautiful. Why wouldn't he? They end up getting into a museum after hours to look at this like gravestone that some dude carved like alchemical symbols into. She insists that she take it off of the wall, put it down, and then she starts national treasuring the tombstone. Okay. It works.
Lemons.
The reason she sought out George specifically is because George can speak Aramaic. Guess what happens when George translates the Aramaic into English? I may or may not have included that rule with this movie specifically in mind. They're trying to figure out how to get into this one like hidden part of the tunnels that doesn't exist. But there's this like random dude that shows up and he's like, go to this nightclub, ask for Papillon. And then the guy disappears. Like, I should have included that in the game, honestly, where it's like you think you're talking to a normal person, and then you like turn around and then you turn back around and then like they're gone. I'm gonna drink for it anyway. So yeah, they go to this nightclub, they find Papillon, and she's like, I hear you can get us into this part of the catacombs. Wait, sorry, she's English. I heard you can get us into this part of the catacombs. And he's like, do I look like a tour guide? And she goes, do I look like a tourist? Yes. Poor George. They're getting their gear to like go cave spelunking in the catacombs. Every 5 minutes he's like, no, I'm not going. And she's like, you're coming, George. And he's like, no, I'm not. And Laura's like, I need you with me. And he's like, no, you can just text me whatever you find. Are you dumb, George? Like, are you, like, actually a stupid person, George? George. George. The catacombs are underground. They have, like, these pinhole cameras on their headlamps that Benji installed. George ends up coming with them because the cops, like, find them and tackle them. There's, like, this weird side room, and you hear, like, spooky music. It's actually coming from this, like, cult choir, and, like, the girl conducting it was, like, staring at them all weird when they were in the nightclub looking for Papillon, which I think is an unnecessary detail. Like, it would have been creepy enough without that connection, but cool. There's a couple of boobs in that scene. I'm not gonna count that as sexual content because they're not doing anything sexual. Sweet Benji. He is freaked out by human bones. It causes a cave-in of this, like, tunnel that's supposed to get them to where they need to go. It seems like they did a circle, but there was no way that they could have done a circle because they were going in a straight line. So how did they come all the way back around to where they started? While they're having this argument, Scarlet and Suxi have already started percussive maintenancing the wall to this, like, evil tunnel. There's an evil tunnel, apparently. So they break the wall. Papillon mentions that they had a friend who lived in the tunnels. His name was La Taupe, the mole. He knew all of the tunnels inside out and backwards, except this one tunnel. Went into it and disappeared. They haven't seen him since. So, like, clearly it's a bad tunnel. They end up finding him after a while, by the way. And they ask him, hey, how do we get out of here? And he's like, oh, you want to get out? The only way out is down. At this point, I'm kind of thinking they're going to keep going down, kind of like how they went into the tunnel. They went straight and curved back around. They're probably going to keep going down and then just come back up, like, from Enchanted. There's this one part where they're walking through, like, this narrow corridor. There's, like, a trench of water on the ground, and somebody's foot, like, slips and they kind of fall into it for a sec. And the sound goes weird and muffled, like you're underwater. So you kind of think, oh, the microphone got, like, wet and now it sounds like it's underwater. It turns out that the sound went all wonky, like, within the movie, which was really cool because you can see them, like clapping and trying to make sound, and it's like, it sounds like they're underwater. They get to the treasure room, they find the Philosopher's Stone, and then Scarlet realizes that all the treasure that's in this room is a trap. You can't take it, it'll cause a cave-in. And it does. La Taupe was buried, and Suxi gets injured, but the Philosopher's Stone gets, like, you know, Scarlet grinds it up a little bit, she puts it on Suxi's arm, and it's, like, totally healed. So there's a door in the floor, because you always gotta have, you know, a way out in case, you know, somebody gets caved in. So they go through the door that's in the floor. George, like, translates this thing that's written on, like, this tunnel that they're crawling through. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And Scarlet explains to us that that is supposed to be what's written on the gates to hell. I'm gonna count that as an exposition dump because I'm thirsty. This is when they kind of make that crossover into the Upside Down. It's like everything is the same, but it's just backwards.
Everything is different now.
They find La Taupe again, even though he was presumably dead, but then he's here in the Upside Down. But he's not La Taupe. He's evil La Taupe. Like, he was weird before, but he's, like, bad now. We know that because he immediately murders Suxi to death. And that's not cool. And Scarlet is like, yo, Papillon, you can't be sad, we gotta keep moving. But then it's like in the very next scene, Benji gets jump scared to death. He's, like, gathering up the courage to, like, drop down this hole, and there's, like, a baby crying, and then, like, a woman holding a baby, like, jumps out of the darkness and scares him, and then he falls down the hole and dies, and suddenly Scarlet cares about a life. They're crawling through this thing, and there's, like, another trench of water, I guess. George sees his brother, who died when they were kids because he like drowned in a cave or something, and he's like freaking out, and Scarlett's like, George, it's not real. And he's like, but that's my brother. Okay, so then they walk into this one chamber of the tunnels, and there's a car on fire. There's a guy sitting in the back seat, and that is actually the same guy that told Scarlett and Benji to find Papillon. Papillon says, no, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault, and now Papillon gets got, like, drag me to hell style. Literally, like, he reaches out from the car and, like, grabs him and pulls him down. There's really not a lot you can do when a flaming car collapses in on itself. So now we're just left with Scarlett, George, and Zed. Scarlett and George actually have a really cute relationship. At the beginning, he's like, you abandoned me in a Turkish prison, and she's like, I said sorry. And now he's like, that week in Turkey was, like, the best week of my life. There's, like, faces in the walls, and one of these, like, goblin things attacks George and, like, rips a chunk out of his throat. There's a lot of blood in, like, the third act, so if you're not a blood person, the stone doesn't heal George. Scarlett leaves to go return the Philosopher's Stone because she realizes, oh, I need to rectify the fact that I took the stone by putting the stone back, and then I'll get the real stone or something. So she, like, goes off on her own to do all this stuff, and she's, like, traversing these horrors. She falls into that, like, trench of water that we saw earlier, except now it's blood and there are hands coming out of it, which is, like, so cool looking. She manages to, like, get out. She finds, like, the hanging body of her dead father. She, like, takes the bag off of the one body's head. Literally, who would remove the bag? She puts the stone back, finally, and there's, like, this reflective, like, gold plate kind of in the wall. She, like, wipes it off. So she goes, and it's, like, at every turn, she sees her father's body there, too. She, like, takes off her headlamp so that we get, you know, the cute shot of her, like, hugging his body, and she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't pick up the phone that night. And then he disappears because she finally, like, rectified her guilt. So she gets back to George, and I guess that moment with the reflective bit was saying that, like, the power of the stone is in Scarlett now, because she puts her hands on George's neck and he's, like, healed miraculously. By the way, this is not mentioned again for the rest of the movie. She's like, you know, you need to rectify your guilt in order to get out. And so George is like, I feel guilty because I told my brother I would be right back with help, and he died waiting for me to come back. And then Zed is like, I refuse to acknowledge this child that I know is mine. And then they jump down this really big long hole, and there's a manhole cover at the bottom. Scarlett and George are, like, trying to, like, pull it up, and it won't budge. But then Scarlett slams down on it, and it moves. They're pushing it down, but they're actually pushing it up and, like, out of the way. Scarlett, like, throws her, like, headlamp off. We get, like, the cool hero shot, and they crawl through, very Giselle from Enchanted style. You know, typically found footage movies don't end well, but in this case, 3 of them made it out. I like that any sound or, like, bit of music could be diegetic within the universe of the movie, because the tunnels are creating all sorts of things. It's messing with your mind. Why wouldn't it create some sort of, like, mood music to make you feel spooky? The first time I watched it, I kind of expected to hate it based solely on the fact that he translates Aramaic into perfect rhyming couplets. The slow parts, they just kind of accent the overarching plot without, like, killing any of the momentum. It's a good movie. I liked it. Speaking of liking things, if you liked this video, drop a like down below, comment, subscribe. That's a thing you're able to do. I should be back next week. In the meantime, cheers!